This is David Sanborn, American alto saxophonist. Now, he's been described as one of the most commercially successful American saxophonists of all time. And if you're looking for somebody who's been described as the most influential saxophonist on pop, R&B, and crossover, you came to the right place. This video will examine the life and music of David Sanborn. Welcome back to my channel. David William Sanborn, born July 30th, 1945, died May 12th, 2024, was an American alto saxophonist. Sanborn worked in many musical genres. His solo recordings typically blended jazz with instrumental pop and R&B. He began playing the saxophone at the age of 11 and released his first solo album, Taking Off, in 1975. He was active as a session musician and played on numerous albums by artists including Stevie Wonder, Bruce Springsteen, Aretha Franklin, Sting, The Eagles, Rickie Lee Jones, James Brown, George Benson, Carly Simon, Elton John, Bryan Ferry, and the Rolling Stones. He released more than 20 albums and won 6 Grammy Awards. Sanborn was one of the most commercially successful American saxophonists to earn prominence since the 1980s. He was described by critic Scott Yanow as the most influential saxophonist on pop, R&B, and crossover players of the past 20 years. He became identified with radio-friendly smooth jazz, although he disliked the term and said he was not a jazz musician. Sanborn was born in 1945 in Tampa, Florida, where his father was stationed in the U.S. Air Force, and grew up in Kirkwood, a suburb of St. Louis, Missouri. He contracted polio at the age of 3. He accepted his fate stoically and endured a miserable childhood. He was confined to an iron lung for a year, and the polio left him with impaired respiration, and his left arm was shorter than his right. While confined to bed, he was inspired by the raw rock and roll energy of music he heard on the radio, particularly saxophone breaks in songs such as Fats Waller's Ain't That a Shame and Little Richard's Tutti Frutti. He loved the sound of the saxophone, and at the age of 11 was happy to change to saxophone from piano lessons when doctors recommended that he take up a wind instrument to improve his breathing and strengthen his chest muscles. By the age of 14, he was a good enough saxophonist to play with blues musicians in local clubs. Alto saxophonist Hank Crawford, at the time a member of Ray Charles' band, was an early and lasting influence. Sanborn attended college at Northwestern University and studied music. He later transferred to the University of Iowa. Sanborn performed with blues musicians Albert King and Little Milton at the age of 14. In 1967, he took a Greyhound bus to San Francisco to join the Summer of Love, and while visiting recording studios, was invited to sit in on a session with the Paul Butterfield Blues Band. He made such an impression that he stayed with the band for 5 years. Sanborn recorded on 4 Butterfield albums as a horn section member and soloist from 1967 to 1971, and in the early morning of Monday, August 18, 1969, he appeared with the band at the Woodstock Music Festival in New York. In 1972, Sanborn played on the track Tuesday Heartbreak on the Stevie Wonder album Talking Book. In 1975, he worked with David Bowie on Young Americans and on the James Taylor recording How Sweet It Is to Be Loved by You on the album Gorilla. In the mid-1970s, Sanborn became active in the popular jazz fusion scene by joining the Brecker Brothers band, where he became influenced by Michael Brecker. With the Brecker Brothers, he recorded his first solo album, Taking Off, which became a jazz-funk classic. In 1985, Sanborn and Al Jarreau played 2 sold-out concerts in Atlanta. Although Sanborn was mostly associated with smooth jazz, he studied free jazz in his youth with saxophonists Roscoe Mitchell and Julius Hemphill. Sanborn was a highly regarded session musician from the late 1960s onward and played with an array of well-known artists, and the list is endless. Many of his solo recordings were collaborations with bassist, multi-instrumentalist, composer, and producer Marcus Miller, whom he met in the Saturday Night Live band in the late 1970s. Sanborn performed with Eric Clapton on film soundtracks such as Lethal Weapon and its sequels and Scrooged. In 1991, Sanborn recorded Another Hand, which the All Music Guide in Jazz described as a return by Sanborn to his real, true love, unadorned jazz that balanced the scales against his smooth jazz material. The album, produced by Hal Willner, featured musicians from outside the smooth jazz scene such as Terry Adams, Charlie Haydn, Jack DeJohnette, and Bill Frisell. In 1994, Sanborn appeared on a celebration, the music of Peter Townsend and The Who, also known as Daltrey Sings Townsend, a two-night concert at Carnegie Hall produced by Roger Daltrey of the English rock band The Who in celebration of his 50th birthday. Sanborn often performed at Japan's Blue Note venues in Osaka and Tokyo. In 2010, Sanborn toured with a trio featuring jazz organist Joey DeFrancesco and Steve Gadd. They played the combination of blues and jazz from his album Only Everything. In 2011, Sanborn toured with keyboardist George Duke and bassist Marcus Miller as the group DMS. Besides playing alto saxophone as his main instrument, Sanborn also played baritone and soprano saxophones, flute, and keyboard/pianos on some recordings. Sanborn performed and hosted radio, television, and web programs. He was a member of the Saturday Night Live band in 1980. From the late 1980s, he was a regular guest member of Paul Schaefer's band on Late Night with David Letterman. He also appeared a few times on the Late Night with David Letterman in the 1990s. From 1988 to 1989, he co-hosted Night Music, a late-night music show on television with Jules Holland. Following producer Hal Willner's eclectic approach, the show positioned Sanborn with many famed musicians such as Miles Davis, Dizzy Gillespie, Eric Clapton, Robert Cray, Lou Reed, Santana, Todd Rundgren, Leonard Cohen, Sonic Youth, and Curtis Mayfield, and more. During the 1980s and 1990s, Sanborn hosted a syndicated radio program, The Jazz Show with David Sanborn. Sanborn recorded many shows, theme songs, as well as several other songs for The Late Late Show with Tom Snyder. In 2021, as the coronavirus pandemic paused live music performances in public venues, Sanborn hosted a series of master classes on Zoom and also virtual productions of Sanborn sessions with artists such as Marcus Miller, Sting, Michael McDonald, which involved live performances and interviews from his home in Westchester, New York. Sanborn won 6 Grammy Awards and had 8 gold albums and 1 platinum album. Sanborn won Grammy Awards for Voyeur in 1981, Double Vision in 1986, and the instrumental album Close Up in 1988. In 2004, Sanborn was inducted into the St. Louis Walk of Fame. I hope you enjoyed this video on one of my favorite saxophonists of all time, David Sanborn. If you've got an artist or band you'd like featured on this channel, pop it in the comment section. I'll make another video. Thanks for dropping by. Rock on.